Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Omar Khalid. But today is the 27th of October 2022, and these are the stories that we will be discussing in detail during the course of the show. We will begin with the importance of today's day, that is the Black Day that is being commemorated across Pakistan and across the world, and the Indian-held occupied Jammu and Kashmir region to observe what happened decades ago on this very day in 1947, when the Indian forces entered illegally the illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir region, and since then they haven't left. In fact, if you look at the least recent statistics, more than 900,000 troops are present there as we speak. Then to top it all, we've got all the barbarities that have been going on the Kashmiris, starting from rape, starting from murder, incarceration, jails, muting of voices, whether it be of journalists, whether it be of political leaders, then no respite for any of the Kashmiri leaders who have been put into jail despite their ill health. They are not being given the due medical treatment, and as a result of which we've seen recent deaths that have occurred because of that, because proper treatment was not given to them. Today is the day that we vow to try our level best to give these Kashmiris their right to self-determination, so that they can decide through a plebiscite what they want to do with their region, with their lives. And India is also trying to change that demography through different tactics. So the importance is to have this plebiscite before it's way too late. This is going to be our first segment, Black Day, October 27, 2022. Our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns an important presser that was held today by the DG ISPR as well as the DG ISI, in which they talked about different important issues, the political arena, the political situation that is currently prevalent in the country, and of course the tragic death of Arshad Sharif, and the way it is being propagated on social media, the different conspiracy theories. They put to rest a lot of those conspiracy theories and a lot of speculations concerning their respective departments as well. They also talked about the fact that fact, fiction and opinion needed to be differentiated. They also talked about a certain media channel that has been working as a spin doctor, and again the emphasis was not to manufacture facts. This is going to be our second story. Let's come to our first, and that concerns the Black Day today that is being observed in Pakistan, in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and across the world, to observe what happened on this very day in 1947. The same continues today. More in the following report.
Kashmiri people have been rendering unparalleled sacrifices for their freedom from Indian yoke since 1947 and are determined to continue their struggle till settlement of Kashmir dispute in accordance with people's aspirations. Many generations of innocent Kashmiri men, women and children had known nothing but Indian brutality, bloodshed and torture. An entire Pakistani nation reaffirmed unwavering support to their Kashmiri brothers and sisters in their just struggle for freedom. Kashmiris on both sides of the line of control and world over are observing 27th October as Black Day to convey to the world that India has occupied their motherland illegally and against their aspirations. President Dr. Arif Alvi called upon world community to play its part in facilitating a peaceful and just resolution of long-standing dispute of Jammu and Kashmir in accordance with relevant Security Council resolutions and wishes of the Kashmiri people. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif emphasized that only a solution to Jammu and Kashmir dispute lies in ensuring that Kashmiris are allowed to exercise their right of self-determination through the democratic process of holding an unmandated, free and impartial plebiscite, while stressing that Pakistan will always stand by Kashmiri brothers and sisters. Elucidating Pakistan's enduring commitment to Kashmir cause, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs Hina Rabbani Kar stated that Pakistan believes in full diplomatic peaceful pressure for resolution of Kashmir dispute, and Pakistan is fighting the case of Kashmiris on the basis of international laws and UN Security Council resolutions. No amount of Indian atrocities could deter the people of Kashmir from pursuing their struggle for right to self-determination, and people of Kashmir would never surrender their fundamental rights.
Now, to discuss this very important day, the significance of today, and the barbarities that have been continuing since 1947 on the hapless Kashmiri people without giving them their due right to self-determination. We've been joined in the studios by Sundas Malik. She's the chairperson of the United Jammu and Kashmir Coalition. Sundas, thank you very much to have joined us.
Thank you for having me.
Sundas, today, if we've seen all across Pakistan, there were rallies, there were solidarity events, there were walks, there were statements that were given from the Prime Minister to the President, to the Foreign Minister, to the State Minister for Foreign Affairs, to the Minister for Information, and different important leaders who all were unilateral in their solidarity with the people of Kashmir. What, in your point of view, is the central theme and the message that goes across this year to the Kashmiri people who are still under subjugation?
Well, I think on the part of at least the Pakistani leadership and the Hurriyat leadership, a strong message of support from Pakistan has gone to the people of Kashmir. And not only that, statements like from the Foreign Ministry of China, even these sort of statements let the people of Kashmir know that their struggle, their 75-year-long struggle against an illegal occupation is not going unnoticed. And the world may be a little too late, but is finally taking notice of what's going on there.
All right, let's come to, before we come to our local leaders, let's come to our friendly neighborhood country of China, whose foreign ministry spokesperson today said that the Kashmir issue needs to be properly resolved peacefully in accordance with the United Nations Charter, relevant Security Council resolutions and bilateral agreement, and stressed to avoid taking unilateral actions. I repeat, unilateral actions that could further complicate the situation. How important is this statement also?
Well, I think this statement echoes every single UNSC, UNCIP charter that has been, resolution that has been passed in context of Kashmir. It not only reaffirms our core belief that any action that is taken by the Indian authorities in Kashmir, any unilateral action, is not only a violation of their own constitution, but internationally it is seen as a grievous violation and even noticed by such countries as China.
Now, Sundas, the entire world body knows about the importance of this day, but in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, there's complete shutdown, there's curfew today. That we also talked yesterday with another of the Kashmiri leaders that we had in our studios. In your point of view, what is the general reaction of the international community as far as the Kashmiri message that has been echoing since decades is concerned?
Well, of course, the general reaction, like we saw recently by the German Foreign Secretary, when we saw the American representatives visit Azad Kashmir, we saw their response as well on the Kashmir issue. But I think it is not only important to understand what is going on in Kashmir, but understand the urgency of a resolution. Like our President mentioned earlier, that the world needs to come to terms with the immediate and urgent requirement of a resolution in terms of Kashmir, and that only to the citizens of Kashmir as a free and fair plebiscite.
All right, you know, you talked about our President, our Prime Minister, our Minister for Foreign Affairs, our State Minister for Foreign Affairs, who participated in a walk this morning as well, our Minister for Information, so many important leaders. They were all unilateral, as I said in the very beginning, in their support for the people of illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Is the message going across to the world?
I think if we feel that the effort that was made today or the effort that is made every day is anything in comparison to the sheer propaganda that the Indian government is conducting, I don't think we amount to what their optical illusion, as I call it, is in terms of Kashmir. However, I think the reason the world is aware and the reason these efforts have a greater impact is because we deal in truth. We don't have any propaganda. Everything and anything related to Kashmir that the people of Kashmir Valley say can be verified. We recently saw a young journalist who was refused to go and receive her Pulitzer Prize from the Kashmir Valley.
Because she was Kashmiri?
Yes. So the world recognizes that. When a Kashmiri is stopped from obtaining one of the highest honors in literature, even that is not acceptable through the Indian Union, who after 2019 claims to have made Kashmir a part of their own country, which is not true.
But the fact remains that India, despite its tom-tomming the fact that it's a pluralistic country, it's a country where people have their rights, the realities are quite the opposite, in fact. But there is again another sad reality in the fact that the world is also keeping mum when it comes to action. We've had so many reports, and in the previous shows we've discussed with you as well, different human rights organizations where UNHRC, Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, and the list goes on, have given facts and figures of all that has been happening in the Indian Hill Valley. Pakistan has given a fact sheet as far as what is happening in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is concerned. Is economy or strategic relations with India so important that human rights get sidelined?
Unfortunately, as we see right now, it is the truth, because we see that India is a huge market, and we see that its trade partners remain mum on the Kashmir issue, mainly because of the fact that they have trade deals with India and they want to further their economic interest in India. However, I think if they see it from a perspective where any instability inside the Kashmir Valley translates not only inside Pakistan but also in the Indian Union. So I think as long as the Kashmir issue is not resolved, any economic furtherance will always be halted. We saw how India tried to open up flight routes from Srinagar to Dubai, but it was immediately stopped because, as we know, Pakistan is a country which sits right in between. So they need to understand that as long as both parties sit down with the citizens of Kashmir and conduct a free and fair plebiscite, there is not going to be any economic growth or stability inside this Southeast Asian area.
But the fact remains, Sundas, that India doesn't care about progress in its country or its region at the expense of giving the people of illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir their due right. What is their basic fear as far as giving this due human right to the people of the region is concerned?
Well, I think to an extent Modi's regime since 2014 has resolved why India was occupying Kashmir. The reason for Indian occupation of Kashmir was this a symbol of Indian secularism and pluralism. However, since Modi's government and since this far and wide declaration of Hindutva Raj and Akhand Bharat and all of that, they have declared to the world that it is not in fact a secular state, it is a Hindu state where survival of Muslims who do accept themselves as Indian citizens is difficult, let alone citizens like Kashmiris who do not identify as Indians. So I think to an extent Modi's regime has resolved it. However, as far as their indifference to any economic growth in comparison to an occupation of Kashmir is concerned, I hope in this case saner heads prevail and their partners, their trade partners understand that as long as Kashmir exists as an issue and as a dispute, India can never become fully acceptable to the world, and it will never become fully acceptable to its next door neighbors such as Pakistan. So there will always be instability, which is not good for any of the parties involved.
When you see all that is happening currently in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, when you hear chairmen of organizations such as Genocide Watch that talk about the beginning of genocide, or not only of the Muslims in India illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, but Muslims within India as well. He says the genocide has already begun and he fears that 200 million plus Muslims' lives are at stake. Despite all of that, when it comes to other political situations or other countries, the world comes very quickly to the help of certain countries. Why not for the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir? Is this issue so difficult to solve?
I don't think this issue is that difficult to resolve. As we saw real united support for the citizens of Ukraine during
that is what I was
during the current instability in that area. But when it comes to the citizens of Kashmir, or for that matter the citizens of Palestine, we see a complete indifference, we see a deafening silence. But I think the world will have to pay attention, if not today then later. But I think the longer they delay it, any international organization can see what is happening. The world can definitely see what's happening, but are they actually able to accept the consequences of what might result in a far greater genocide than anyone expects? I mean, our whole population worth of a genocide.
But you know, even people within India are very skeptical of the Modi government. A lot of people want to leave the country just because of that, and I've read a lot of statements regarding that. When it comes to the Kashmiri leadership, a lot of them are incarcerated. In fact, most of them are incarcerated. A lot of them, some of them passed away recently of ill health, and they were not given proper medical treatment, deliberately not given proper medical treatment. Is the Kashmiri resolve still strong as far as the right to self-determination and the basic human rights for the people of their region is concerned?
Well, I think the leadership that's currently out is not accepted as leadership in Kashmir. Honestly, we saw the results during the previous general elections. They're not accepted as representatives of neither the political front or the resistance front. As far as the true resistance representatives are concerned, such as Masarat Alam Bhatt, Yasin Malik, Shabir Shah, Asian Drabi, these people, these representatives, despite being in prison, have left the youth of Kashmir, which began with people such as Burhan Wani, Manan Wani, these people. And it has continued to get passed on that message of not losing that ground as far as the resistance movement is concerned. So I think we do see the silver lining, and when we see this support, this united support from Pakistan and from the rest of the world, it only increases our resolve for our free and fair God-given right.
Finally, Sundas, you know, when you look at the different aspects of this Kashmir dispute of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, a lot of articles have been written in the past, also very recently, but they emphasize on certain aspects. There's a commonality as far as what needs to be done. Stoppage of human rights violations in Indian illegally held occupied Jammu and Kashmir, stoppage of demographic changes being made in the region, demilitarization of the region, restoration of the pre-August 5, 2019 status, and giving Kashmiris their right to self-determination as per the UN resolutions. How optimistic or not are you for all of these to be handled in an effective manner in the near future or maybe in the coming years?
Well, I'm definitely optimistic, but not without effort. I think we need much more. If I say every day the Kashmir issue is not resolved, we have failed. Because this right was not granted to us by the United Nations. This was granted to us by God. We need to have the right to identify ourselves as what we want. But I think as far as the humanitarian aspect or the demographic change aspect is concerned, it cannot be seen in isolation. It needs to be seen as the unresolved issue of the 1947 partition, and then stemming from that, we need to see it in that context, and then only I think a real resolution can be reached.
But you remain optimistic?
Of course I do.
All right. Thank you so very much, Sundas Malik, Chairperson, United Jammu and Kashmir Coalition, to have joined us, to have come all the way to our studios on this very important day. That is the Black Day that, of course, talks about and makes us remember of the very terrible past and even the present that reflects on what has been happening since so many decades on the people of illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. All we can do, all Pakistan is doing, is to help the people diplomatically, morally, politically. We are doing whatever we can, but it's also, you know, time for the world to do what Pakistan is doing. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
This was our first segment, ladies and gentlemen. Our second story is today's important press briefing that was given by the DG ISPR, Lieutenant General, and of course the DG ISI, Lieutenant General Nadeem Ahmed Anjum. and Lieutenant General Babar Iftikhar, who is the DG ISPR. They talked about many important issues: the current political scenario, the role of a certain political party, the role of a certain media channel that has been working as a spin doctor, and also the way the forces have been subjugated to malign, or to certain efforts to consistently malign the armed forces, certain institutions, deliberately, so as to create a rift between the public and the forces and these institutions. What impact is that going to have, or what impact has it had? How will it bode for the future of politics in Pakistan and the people-to-people relationship and the people-to-organization relationship? More in the following report.
In a very important press conference today, DG ISPR Lieutenant General Babar Iftikhar was accompanied by DG ISI Lieutenant General Nadeem Anjum in a rare appearance by the head of country's top spy agency in public domain. The press briefing was held in the backdrop of journalist Arshad Sharif's killing in Kenya and subsequent smear campaign against army, which has become a norm since April after the ouster of Imran Khan from Prime Minister's office. Responding to a question, DG ISI Lieutenant General Nadeem made startling revelations regarding offers made to the army chief in March when PTI was still in power. It was also the time when Imran Khan felt cornered by PDM alliance. General Nadeem revealed that Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Javed Bajwa was offered an indefinite extension in his tenure as Army Chief in March when PTI led by Imran Khan was in power. The offer was rejected by General Bajwa.
मार्च के महीने में आर्मी चीफ को उनकी मुद्दत मुलाजमत में गैर मुहिना मुद्दत की तोसी की पेशकश भी की गई, मेरे सामने की गई। ये बहुत पुरकशिश पेशकश थी, लेकिन उन्होंने इसको भी ठुकरा दिया, इसलिए कि उन्होंने जो बुनियादी फैसला किया था कि इदारे को मुतनाज़ा रोल से हटा के आइनी रोल पे लाना है। आपको हक है अपनी राय देने का। आई रिस्पेक्ट दैट राइट। एज अ सोल्जर आई एम रेडी टू प्रोटेक्ट दैट राइट। बट मैं ये ज़रूर पूछना चाहता हूँ कि अगर आपका दिल मुतमईन है कि आपका सुपा सलार गद्दार है, मीर जाफ़र है, तो माजी करीब में इतनी तारीफ़ों के पुल क्यों बांधते थे आप? अगर आप समझते हैं कि आपका सुपा सलार गद्दार है, मीर जाफ़र है, तो उसकी मुद्दत मुलाजमत में इतनी तोसी क्यों दे रहे हैं?
With regards to Arshad Sharif's move abroad under still undisclosed circumstances, Spy Chief said Arshad Sharif was safe in Pakistan.
जो मेरे पास मालूमात हैं और तहकीक है, उसकी बुनियाद पे मैं आपको बता सकता हूँ कि शहीद अरशद शरीफ की ज़िंदगी को पाकिस्तान में कोई ख़तरा नहीं था। जब वो यहाँ पर भी थे, एस्टेब्लिशमेंट से, मेरे अपने इदारे के लोगों से रब्ता था। जब वो बाहर गए, वहाँ से भी उनका रब्ता था, और वो वापसी का भी अपनी आने का ख्वाहिश का इज़हार कर रहे थे। हुकूमत ने एक टीम बनाई है जो तहकीकात करने केन्या जाएगी। हुकूमत ने जुडिशल कमीशन भी बनाया है, और मैंने दानिस्ता तौर पर ISI के जो मेंबरान थे इन दोनों फोरम से निकाल लिए, ताकि कौम के सामने गैर जानबदार 100% शफाफ तहकीकात हों, और जो भी इसका नतीजा आएगा इंशाल्लाह DG ISPR आपको इससे आगाह रखेगा।
He further revealed that backdoor talks did indeed take place between various political parties, and these talks were held for the country in order to bring down political temperatures. But he clarified that these talks could not reach their logical conclusion. Lieutenant General Nadeem reiterated that ISI will continue to perform its duties according to the aspirations of Pakistani citizens and the role defined in the Constitution.
Dr. Maria Sultan, who's a defense analyst, joins us online. Maria, thank you very much to have joined us. It's a pleasure to have you for this very important segment. Maria, the DGISI and the DGISPR in an unprecedented presser come together and clarify a lot of important details that have been circulating in the social media and in the media regarding the cipher, regarding a certain political party, regarding the death of Arshad Sharif, and many more important political issues. How important, in your point of view, was this presser in the current political scenario that Pakistan is going through?
I think it was extremely important because, as we understand, that when we are talking about fake news, when we are talking about social mobilization, the first casualty is usually the truth. And in this case, because of the unfortunate death of Mr. Arshad Sharif, the whole nation is not only suffering in the context because they are not sure what were the circumstances under which he met his fateful end, but also this were circumstances which led him to that position. Hence, the nation was looking for a closure. But whenever there is only one side of the story which is presented, it's equally important that the other side also comes forward with their own version. Henceforth, that the people have a better clarity in terms of what actually transpired, and in the end, to restore faith in the fact that institutions stand with the people and stand for transparency.
Maria, more than once it was clarified during the presser that the establishment had no role as far as the life threat to Arshad Sharif is concerned or asking him to leave the country. There was a certain pressure, and that was told openly by Mr. Imran Khan in a public rally recently, that it was he who had told Arshad Sharif to leave the country. When the two important members of the establishment come together and say that Arshad Sharif had no threat to his life, then why is a certain scenario being built, not since now, since a couple of weeks, in fact, that Mr. Arshad Sharif's life was in danger, when in fact it has been negated in today's presser?
You see, whenever there is a life threat which is against anyone, and considerably the fact that it comes from any tangible source, of course there is a certain procedure, and according to that procedure, certain action is taken. If the KPK government had initiated that threat alert, then they were bound by the law to share that intelligence as well as that information with other stakeholders. Henceforth, Mr. Arshad Sharif should have remained not only in Pakistan but would have remained protected. However, what we saw was contrary to this. We saw a lot of political mobilization around this, and we saw unusual movement, and that movement actually led to Mr. Arshad Sharif finding himself in Kenya. And that is, of course, unfortunate considering the fact that this incident happened. I think what's important is that what was said during the press conference, that not only the establishment but also all stakeholders are equally concerned about the circumstances in which Mr. Arshad Sharif met this fateful end and this sad demise, and for that there would be greater efforts and greater pressure exerted by the government of Pakistan as well as other agencies to ensure for greater transparency from the Kenyan government.
Maria, also there has been a deliberate attempt to malign the institution, especially the establishment, and of late PTI leader Imran Khan has left no stone unturned to do that through his different, when he has talked to the public in different cities of Pakistan, and his social media team is also quite active in doing exactly the same. The Chief of the Army Staff has been named different names. That was said openly in today's presser as well. That is why we are also talking openly about this. Why is there a certain deliberate attempt to malign institutions and heads of institutions like the army, like the ISI?
Well, as we understand that we're in the age of hybrid warfare, and in hybrid warfare, it is the credibility of the state institutions which holds the state together. What we are trying to see over here is a distinct effort to differentiate between the state and the government. It is perfectly fine to have criticism against the government. It is perfectly fine to have raised questions about the manner in which the state may operate or may not operate. But it's not right that if you make your own organizations and your own institutions credibility at stake and at risk. Because in that case, if the credibility is lost, then there is an implosion process which is set in. And it is extremely important that the state institutions not only maintain this credibility, but all political parties also understand that there is a difference between the state and the government. And that fine difference is necessary, especially for political parties who will be questioned not in terms of the role of civil-military relations, but in terms of what has been their performance index with regards to their governance outcomes.
Another very important issue, Maria, that was discussed during the presser was the whole cipher issue that the PTI and its leader Imran Khan took to different arenas in order to propagate their political agenda. This has also been negated time and again, and now very openly during this presser. But another question that emanated during the presser, as asked by one of the journalists, was the link between the death of Arshad Sharif and this cipher. Do you feel, as a defense analyst, that there was any link between the two? And also, I'd like your point of view on how political division and political tools like the cipher have been used, something that was not significant enough, and then used to divide the country, to divide the nation into two halves, one that believed in a certain political perspective and point of view that was propagated by the PTI, and the other that did not believe in it. Do you feel this polarization is was really needed, A, and B, for the state of affairs through which Pakistan is going? Do you feel that political parties need to act more responsibly?
I think it's extremely important to understand that once you're in certain office, like for example the office of the Prime Minister, it's not a personal office. There are certain responsibilities and certain obligations which come with the office. And this goes for anybody who's a state official and a government official and who holds positions of authority. And once that information has been shared with you, it's not a personal information to be used for political outcomes, but this is information which is to be used for statecraft. And if this is misused, or the origins of that information is deliberately misconstrued, then of course this not only creates problems internally, as we have seen in terms of perception management, also it creates bigger problems when we look at the foreign policy outcomes. If you would remember, there were also concerns from Russia. There were concerns which were raised from United States. So they were the big two superpowers who responded and who took your office very seriously. And then later on, we found out that unfortunately, according to Imran Khan's own admissions, things were done differently. So this, of course, puts very bad light in terms of our political responsibility towards national security. That said,
yes,
important we differentiate between national security obligations, state obligations, and political obligations.
I think that's very important. I think the responsibility lies not only on political parties to understand the delicacy of the situation that Pakistan is going through, but also the narrative building that certain political parties have deliberately been going through, which is based on not on facts but instead on falsehoods, as has been said in this presser today. Which brings me to also the role of the media. A certain media network, ARY, was mentioned time and again during this presser, and its CEO Salman Iqbal's role was also mentioned by the DG ISPR, and it was also said that he needs to be brought back to Pakistan in order to take part in investigation on the whole process. Do you feel the media channels, whether they have a certain linking or inkling towards a political party, need to also act more responsibly and more neutrally in matters that concern the state?
Well, I think I would just like to say one thing. Media has only one responsibility, and that is towards the truth. And that is towards civic responsibility, and to understand the fact that information comes with great responsibility, and it also comes with great impact. If it is used for personal reasons or it is used for corporate reasons, then of course the results are not always the same way we would expect them to be. And being part of an investigation does not mean that he has been accused. And I think at this moment, everybody is equally disturbed by what has happened to Mr. Rashid Sharif. He was a fine gentleman, irrespective of his perspective on things. As on a personal level, he was commendable with regards to his obligations towards his profession. So in that case, if he had deviated or others had misused him or whatever the circumstances, there is a need for the country and for the nation to know what actually happened. Because that is the only responsibility which media, the government and the state holds towards its people. That is to provide a truthful version of what and how things have.
Now, we've seen how the Chief of the Army Staff, General Bajwa, has been targeted, and that was also part of the discussion today during the presser. An attempt was also made to create a divided society through this and other important issues that plague Pakistan. The DGISP also said one thing, and I'd like to have your point of view on that. Fact, fiction and opinion need to be differentiated. Now, what he also added was that on social media, you no longer see opinions, but you have everybody is stating facts and not opinions. When and how can a country like ours and our youth especially learn to understand the difference between fact, fiction and opinion, and how important is it in this day and age?
I think this is a very hard and a difficult task, because in the era of fake news, it's not very easy to differentiate between fact and fiction. It's not very easy to differentiate between what we believe is the version of the truth versus the other version of the truth. So in this case, all what we can do is to present all versions of the truth. And that's what the DGISPR and the DGISI try to carry out today. That if there was one dominant discourse which was happening in the country, it should meet another alternative discourse which also exists. Henceforth, the enlightened, or for that matter, the bigger diaspora of the country, is also able to now decipher the truth. Now, in this case, what are the steps required? There would be certain steps in which, of course, investigations need to be brought forward. In certain cases, all these deliberations need to be made public. But last but not least, we need to understand that governance is one thing which we need to be responsible. Government and government policy making has got another dynamic. And last but not least, state and statecraft has got different dimensions. And it is extremely important for civil and military leadership to understand that they are not just responsible to themselves, but they're also responsible towards this country. And for that matter, towards the...
All right. Maria, also the DGISPR stated that there was no external threat to Pakistan as we speak at this moment. Do you feel that because of the current political scenario internally, that we could face internal threats within the country?
Well, of course, whenever there is political disillusionment, there is always the question of how people will respond, because at the end of the day, it's about the people, government, and the armed forces which creates the state. And also not only the state, but also the functioning of the state. Now, in this context, of course, your adversaries would like to take cognizance of the differences which exist, polarization, if there is any, and then to build on it. And in this case, it becomes extremely important for all players to come forward and give a version of the truth. If they don't, then of course the other sides will play. Because so long there is gray and so long there is haze, there is always the casualty of truth. And this is what we are trying to avoid. Now, the bigger question is whether or not we can face an external threat. Yes, we can always face that threat, because the adversary would always try to see if there are any fissures. They will try to see if they can mobilize. But one thing is for sure, irrespective of the political parties, irrespective of the civil military leadership, the people of Pakistan, just like the DGISPR and DGISI stated, are very coherently aware of any external threat. And in this case, if there's any external threat which we face from India, or for that matter, any other adversary, we shall respond back together as a unified nation.
Maria, also let's revert back to hate speech. When we see hate speech emanating either from a political party or from individuals or on social media, and I think it is a lot of below the belt narrative that has been building on social media, especially on Twitter and on Facebook, regarding the political situation in the country, and of course maligning not only people present at important high places in the institutions, but institutions themselves. Do you feel that rules and regulations need to be more stringent to, if not stop completely, but at least halt such activities from taking place one way or the other? And if so, what kind of rules or regulations could be put into place, whether it be for social media or whether it be for traditional media like newspapers or television?
I think this is a very hard question you've asked. It's never easy to prepare a nation for civic education when it comes to responsibility towards information, opinion, and then broadcasting. The problem with Pakistan has been that we have mushrooming of media, we have a mushrooming of social media, but we have not matched our legislative structures. Henceforth, when it comes to responsibility, people believe that liberty is about talking. Liberty is not an absolute concept. Liberty also means that you also have to recognize the rights of others, not to be intimidated, not to be threatened, not to be abused, and the right to disagree. And I think that is the right which has been abused. And if such and such things carry on, we have seen that there are repercussions. For that, our judicial system would need to be much more active, and action needs to be taken. If we are able to close the loop, the regulations would work. But up till now, the regulations are not in place in the same manner, and if they are in place, the judicial connectivity does not exist. This means that we need to rethink. It means that we need to go back to the parliament. It means that we need to have open debates in terms of what constitutes liberty, what constitutes opinion, what constitutes the opinion to disagree. The question to disagree exists in all cultures. To have different opinions, alternative opinions, is just fine. But to be targeted,
but there's a thin red line between having an opinion and then maligning someone or an institution for that matter.
Just like I said, if you're harassed, of course, then there are counteractions which are taken.
That is true, Maria. And finally, I mean, I've taken a lot of your time. I can understand that. What, in your point of view, is the best forum to regulate all that has been happening, so that what we see on the political front right now, what we see in the form of hate speech on social media or on traditional media, what we see as information that is not based on facts, especially when it concerns important events such as the murder of Arshad Sharif or other events that are happening like the cipher. Do you feel that there's a certain forum that is most apt to handle these things effectively?
Yes, and I think that is the Parliament of Pakistan. We will need to empower our parliamentary democracy, and we will need to activate our committees and our subcommittees in the parliament so that we can look into all of these issues piecemeal as well as in a collective manner, come up with conclusions which would actually hold credibility, hold respect, and most importantly, bear the test of time. This would also mean that we will all parties, all political parties, would need to also respect their institutions. If you don't respect your institutions, then you cannot expect the institutions to be available when you require them. And we understand from the current situation as well that irrespective of how we see the institutions, these institutions are necessary when we're talking to the other world. These institutions are necessary when we're having internal debates, and these institutions are necessary when we need logical conclusions.
All right. Thank you so very much, Dr. Maria Sultan, Defense Analyst, to have joined us, to have talked to us about this important presser that was held today by the DGISI and the DGISPR that laid bare many important issues that were confronting Pakistan, whether it be on the political front, whether it be around the death of Mr. Sharif, or whether it be around the cipher or the maligning especially of institutions such as the army or their heads or the ISI even for that fact. This brings us to the end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new segments, stories that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. As I always end my show, I ask all of you who are watching to kindly help in whichever capacity you can for the people who are confronted with the dastardly floods. Help them through a text message to 9999. Help them through giving food or medicine or clothes or your shoes that you haven't been using. Help them through money or different other means that you can. But do help them. There are so many avenues that you can, whether it be through the government, through the armed forces, through the NGOs, through the philanthropists, or through individuals that have been doing it on their own. But do help. I think it's our collective responsibility to take our country out of the current crisis that it is embroiled in. I'll end with this little statement, a small 3 words by the DGISPR. He said, don't manufacture facts. I think it is very important in this day and age also to not manufacture facts and stay as close to the truth as possible. That is how we can hold our heads high in the community of nations. Allah Hafiz.